heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who suppress the truth in unrighteousness. Because what may be known of God is manifest in them, for God has shown it to them. For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. Because although they knew God, they did not glorify him as God, nor were thankful, but became futile in their thoughts, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Professing to be wise, they became fools, and changed the glory of the incorruptible God into an image made like corruptible man, and birds, and four-footed animals, and creeping things. Let's bow our heads. Father in heaven, let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, my Lord, my strength, and my Redeemer. Amen. All right, if we go back to the ancient writings of man, we find certain attributes, even then, that men and women needed to exhibit that are considered vital for our continued existence. The Greek philosopher Plato listed in Book 4 of his treatise called The Republic, those virtues he called the four virtues. And they included prudence, which in the Greek is sometimes translated as wisdom. He mentions courage, which is sometimes translated into English as fortitude and bravery and boldness. Temperance is mentioned by Plato. This is moderation, restraint, self-control. And finally, justice, which we give the general term of fairness. Okay? More recently, an author of a children's book, William Bennett, writing in his book, The Book of Virtues, he gathered these following characteristics together as traits that we want to have our children to have. We all want children to have, certain attributes, don't we? Well, those included these things that are most desirable for a young person to have. They include things like responsibility, courage, compassion, honesty, friendship, persistence, and faith. So if you looked over your bulletin and you discovered that the name of this message is the lost virtue, by now you've got to be asking yourself, what's missing? If we know about all of these things, what else is there? Well, you would think by now, over this period of time, given the time between the 20th and 21st centuries and the time of the ancient Greeks and Plato, that we would have discovered what that missing virtue is. Well, the good news is it's not really missing and it's not really lost. It's just not exercised as often as it should be, and that's the problem. We find it most prominently in the writings and speeches of a Roman senator by the name of Cicero. Cicero is an absolutely interesting character. I spent a great deal of my junior year in high school translating from Latin into English, the works of Cicero. Now, freshman year, of course, there was only general Latin, declensions, verb conjugations. Then in the second year, we had to work on translating the Gallic Wars by Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar was a strange guy to translate because he wrote in the third person. Even when he was referring to himself, he always said he did this or he did that. Very difficult until you get your mind wrapped around it to actually understand what somebody's trying to say when they're talking in the third person. For some people, it's annoying. the way some people are. Cicero accounts for about 70% of what we have today as existing Roman literature. And he noted and identified this missing or lost virtue when he stated that the virtue of gratitude was the parent of all other virtues. One more time. The virtue of gratitude is the parent of all other virtues. In order to get the other virtues, we need to be able to say thank you. We need to be able to show gratitude. And this is what is missing or rarely used. Now, his belief, probably more secular than not, was that when gratitude is missing from the fabric of our lives, we are diminished. Fairly recently, the year 2003, research has confirmed that gratitude actually improves psychological, relational, cognitive, and spiritual well-being. Being able to say thank you helps us in many different areas of our lives. It reminds me of an episode of a TV program I once saw. I don't watch much TV anymore. There's not much there for me anymore. I've been sorely disappointed with the direction that things have gone. Right? My wife will tell you I barricade myself up in the bedroom and read, or maybe if I answer my email and things like that, that's probably the extent of what might be considered entertainment. All right? But every once in a while, if you go over the air, forget cable and satellite dish and that stuff, but if you go over the air, you'll catch an old TV program, a rerun they call them now, all right, a rebroadcast. And a few months back, I picked up a episode of the Andy Griffith Show. Some of you are old enough to remember Andy Griffith, okay? And of course, Andy Griffith on the Andy Griffith Show played Andy Taylor, the sheriff of Mayberry, North Carolina. And he had a nice, easy, gentle way of speaking and slowly, and the words came out. And he had a little boy, Ronnie Howard, of course, who's now this tall and has very little hair left. But back then, he was about that tall, and he had the hair locks all over the place, and he would walk into the sheriff's office and he'd say, "Pa!" And then whatever little problem was going on in that particular episode, they got over it, they got past it. But one day, Opie walks into the office and says, "Pa, I've been thinking, I'd like to have an increase in my allowance." And so Andy pulls a chair next to him and he says, "Opie, I want you to sit right here." And he says, "Well, let's think about this now. Right now, you've got chores. You pick up your room. And now and again, you take out the garbage. And yeah, you rake the leaves off of the front yard there every so often. And I know you're just a little guy and it takes you some time. But let's talk about some of the other things that you might be able to do to earn yourself an increase in that allowance." And Opie is wide-eyed with this because he never really thought much about doing more. He only thought about getting more. So by the time Andy gets done explaining everything to his little boy and how he needs to take on more responsibility in order to earn that extra allowance, Opie just finds the whole concept, in his words, just kind of depressing. Like Opie, gratitude is something that sometimes eludes us. And this world today has practically abandoned it. Practically abandoned the whole concept of thankfulness. My family will tell you one of my favorite holidays is Thanksgiving. But what has Thanksgiving come to mean now? watching football and stuffing yourself silly. That's what Thanksgiving now means to some people, most people. It's a tragic thing. I go in with high hopes, and suddenly it's kind of unfulfilled. So just exactly what is gratitude? Well, the classic definition for gratitude is an appreciation of benefits received. Okay, I can live with that. But maybe now we ought to look at what gratitude isn't. Gratitude is not happiness. Happiness is fleeting. It's a fleeting feeling from a particular circumstance. And that circumstance might be valid at that particular point in time, but things change. So gratitude is not happiness because things change. And gratitude for something shouldn't change. Gratitude is not conditional. I get, therefore I'm thankful. I do not get, therefore I'm not thankful. I don't think that's gratitude either. Gratitude certainly is not guilt. The story of starving children somewhere in the world might create guilt within me, but it doesn't necessarily cause me to feel gratitude for that which I have. And that's what's missing. We sometimes forget to give thanks for what it is that we have. And that's what the world is missing as well. Gratitude is not a mind game or a psychological trick to vanquish difficult situations. Gratitude is a mentality where we recognize three things: a benefit, its value, and the source. Because the benefit comes from somewhere. So where did we lose it? Well, I read to you Romans chapter 1, verses 18 through 23, and I'd like to go over it again. Actually, I'm going to add verses 24 and 25. And the Apostle Paul is very seldom put into a category of being a prophet. He's an evangelist. Evangelism was his forte. But if we carefully read Romans 1, verses 18 through 25, it is hard to believe that he's not talking about today. Let me read from the New Life Version those verses that I read when we got started. We see the anger of God coming down from heaven against all the sins of men. These sinful men keep the truth from being known. Men know about God. He has made it plain to them. Men cannot say that they don't know about God. From the beginning of the world, men could see what God is like through the things He has made. This shows His power that lasts forever. It shows us that He is God. They did know God, but they did not honor Him as God. They were not thankful to Him and thought only of foolish things. Their foolish minds became dark. They said that they were wise, but they showed how foolish they were. They gave honor to false gods that looked like people who can die, and to birds and animals and snakes. This honor belongs to God who can never die. So God let them follow the desires of their sinful hearts. They did sinful things among themselves with their bodies. They traded the truth of God for a lie. They worshiped and cared for what God made instead of worshiping the God who made it. He is the one who is to receive honor and thanks forever. Let it be so. No, I don't suppose he was a prophet. But brothers and sisters, that is the time we're living in now. Everything mentioned in those verses has come to pass. I saw a documentary just the other day, flipping through these broadcast channels. They used to have a program called Modern Marvels, and they would show you about all of the wonders that man has created, all well and good. I was interested in the one on Apollo 8 and the launch of the Apollo series capsules and so forth. Apollo 8 was the one where the commander, James Lovell, read the creation story as the capsule circled the Earth. And you could see the Earth through the porthole of the space module itself. And he read the creation story, Genesis chapter 1. You realize today they would never do anything like that. They wouldn't allow it. We are now in an era where we don't have the freedom of religion, we have the freedom from religion. A football coach in Bremerton, Washington, recently lost his job. At the end of every game, he, all by himself, after the game was over, went to the center of the field and knelt and gave a prayer of thanksgiving to God for the mercy that he had shown upon his players. And he would get up and he would go back to the locker room. He was fired for this display of religion in a public place because he was employed by a district that did not allow that particular sort of demonstration. We've got to ask ourselves, where are we in this world? Giving God the glory, what does that mean? The Hebrew word for glory means heavy, implying weightiness or significance. When we fail to give God the glory, we have chosen to give weight to something or someone else. That in turn is the same as creating an idol and diminishing God's value. It also diminishes God's influence and certainly diminishes God's glory. And brothers and sisters, people don't necessarily recognize it, but it damages us as well. As believers, if we, for some reason or another, neglect to give God the glory, we are hurting ourselves. So we got to ask ourselves, all right, what's going on here? We also need to remember that we fail when we neglect to give thanks, perhaps viewing God's gift in our circumstances and our relationships as entitlements. We know people in the world that think they have a lot more than they've got coming to them. Somehow or another, they think they deserve more. Somehow or another, they expect to receive. Some of these people, without receiving these things, become frustrated and dissatisfied. Our lives are diminished. Thankfulness is not a fulfillment for God. In other words, it doesn't bring God fulfillment to receive thankfulness. It's for us. And gratitude infinitely improves our lives in a couple of ways. So, without gratitude, what do we lose? Well, the first thing, which I find interesting, because as a teacher for a long period of time, I count on this. Without gratitude, we lose our sense of wonder. What do I mean by a sense of wonder? Let me give you the best example I know of a sense of wonder. Luke 18, verses 15 and 16. I'll read it to you. Then they also brought infants to him that he might touch them. But when the disciples saw it, they rebuked them. But Jesus called unto them to him and said, Let the little children come to me, and do not forbid them, for of such is the kingdom of God. What is it that a child has that we lose as an adult sometimes? Innocence, for sure. That is 100% correct. We lose our innocence when we, quote, know so much more. The older I get, I'm beginning to discover how much I really don't know. It's frightening how much I don't know. But we also lose the sense of wonder that comes with the childhood excitement of discovery, of knowing something, that aha moment and the look that comes upon a child's face. You've seen it. I know you have. That child has learned something, and they're in the midst of exploding as they explain to you what it is that they now know. Brothers and sisters, have we lost that? Have we gotten to the point where the things that we take for granted, when they don't work, that brings us down, and we forget about the things that we should be thankful for? How do we react when the internet's slow? How about your cell signal? What if that's not where it's supposed to be? How do you react to that? Or if you happen to be in an airport and your flight is delayed or worse, even canceled. All of these things are marvelous advancements, all right? None of these things, the internet, cell phones, regular flights on an airplane. Oh yeah, if you were going someplace where you couldn't take a train or drive a car. Other than that, I remember as a kid, Mom and Dad loaded us in the back of the car, rolled the windows down because Dad refused to buy a car with air conditioning for quite a while. But he would roll down the windows back there and, boys, sit back there and have a good trip. I'll drive, you watch. Today we have so much, and we so rarely give thanks for what we have. Do we have a sense of entitlement? Unhappiness when things don't work? Where is our sense of wonder? All we need to do is go out and look around us. Salinas, we got the parking lot redone a few years back. It was getting to be an interesting situation because there was one guy who wanted to start a pool to see how many weeds had grown up through the cracks. Well, he got over that after a while because there were just too many weeds. But you know what? The sense of wonder when something grows up through that man-made type of structure, concrete, asphalt, the power of God's nature is so great. How can we not have this sense of wonder? And yet, somehow, we lose it. And certainly, the world has lost it. Without gratitude, we lose our sense of value. Gratitude elevates worth. Say it again. Gratitude elevates the worth of that you're thankful for. We have survived a pandemic. Praise the Lord. During that pandemic, there were some things that weren't available. I, for one, suffered greatly. No, I'm just teasing. I didn't suffer at all. But I did miss getting my hair cut. As a matter of fact, Marilyn tells me I'm due for one again. Okay? And it became quite a chore. Now, Santa Clara County, when they said lockdown, okay? People would call each other on the phone trying to find out where you could get this, or how could I get a haircut? Well, you can go to this guy, you can make an appointment that now costs you $30 to get the haircut, though. Okay, well, you got to do what you got to do. So I call my son. Corey, you think you might come over and cut Dad's hair? Please? Now, I only knew this because my son had started cutting his own hair. I can't begin to tell you what I would look like if I began to cut my own hair. That would be a disaster. I'm guessing for most of you, you would feel pretty much the same way, all right? But my wonderful son, who I guess he and Patty are celebrating their anniversary their first anniversary next month. Yeah, Dad, I'll come over, okay? And he came over, and and talk about being thankful, having gratitude. Just getting that haircut elevated the sense of worth for the haircut. Used to be, before the pandemic, I'd go in, get a haircut. There it was done. Didn't think about it until the next time. I either looked in the mirror earnestly, or Marilyn, gave me a little elbow. And then I'd go get another haircut, and it was done and over with for the next period of time. What does it take for us to recognize the value of something? It starts when we have a heart that is prone to give thanks, to show the gratitude. And what we read in Romans is that the world is not only going to forget about God, but they're going to forget about giving thanks to Him as well. These things that happen don't happen out of thin air. If God didn't create air, where would any of us be? What about water? Sure, the water company gets it to you, or your well. But who created the water? Somebody somewhere wants you to believe, it was just a marvelous accident. No, brothers and sisters, I give thanks that my God, my Creator, my Savior and Redeemer, He prepared the place for me that He wanted me to live in. And it was so well crafted and designed, I have need of nothing. What's it worth? Under this category, I'd also add one more thing. Something I reflect upon myself too. This message just isn't for any one person. It's not only for someone here that might need to hear it, it's for me. How do I show the value to the ones I'm closest to, the ones I love? Do I treat strangers better than I treat my loved ones? Who has more value? We all have value in God's sight, but we need to remember our loved ones deserve that little extra in the way of gratitude. If we are treating strangers better than we are treating our loved ones, something is wrong. Well, without gratitude, we lose our sense of rest. Ungratefulness for God's daily provisions drive us away from God. We get into the habit of doing it for ourselves. I've never had much look at that. Actually, I spend a lot of time picking myself up when I try to do things for myself. I've come to the point where just about everything I start, I bring God in on. Show me what to do. Show me where to go. Yes, Lord, I have the instructions. You know how our instructions are these days. I don't know who translates them. They're supposed to be in English when I get them. I need God. I need help. I really do. Never at rest, we idolize what we don't have, creating dissatisfaction within ourselves and striving to acquire those things that won't really satisfy us. What a dreadful condition to be in. But on a brighter note, a lady named Melody Beattie wrote this about gratitude. Gratitude unlocks the fullness of life. It turns what we have into enough and even more. It turns denial into acceptance, chaos to order, and confusion to clarity. Gratitude can turn a meal into a feast, a house into a home, a stranger into a friend. It turns problems into gifts, failures into successes, the unexpected into perfect timing, and mistakes into important events. Gratitude can turn an existence into a real life, and disconnected situations into important and beneficial lessons. The last thing, without gratitude, we lose sensitivity of the heart. Ingratitude is a heart-hardening habit. We tell our children, and we should be telling ourselves as well, you are becoming today who you will be tomorrow. Our daily habits shape our character over the long haul. If we tell the truth today and again tomorrow, we become people of integrity. Likewise, if we express thanks today and tomorrow, and again the following day, we not only experience the benefits of wonder, value, and rest, but we'll also discover a change in our character. Of course, if we whine today, blame tomorrow, and complain the following day, we become grumpy people that no one enjoys, and worse yet, tend to ignore the blessings that God has provided. So, what shall we say then? Well, I suppose grumpy or grateful, it's your choice. Gratitude begins when we truly understand the grace of life. We deserved death for our sin and received life by God's grace. Brothers and sisters, does your gratitude to God endure?